Hey y'all, and welcome back to Flick Connection, where in less time than you normally spend browsing for something to watch on Netflix, I'm going to tell you about all of the best new release movies to hit Netflix in 2023. That's right, this list is only going to feature movies released since January 2023, and it's a doozy of a list. I've got a bunch to choose from, starting with my last pick on this list, the latest Chris Hemsworth movie, Extraction 2. Now, I really enjoyed and actually raved about Extraction 1. I liked a lot about it, particularly the way all the action was shot, and they carried a lot of that over to Extraction 2. In fact, Extraction 2 is even more over the top than the first one, and honestly, that's why it's so far back on the list, is I don't really feel like they nailed the over-the-top nature. It just was bombastic, kind of for the sake of being bombastic, which I agree is fun, but I feel like it didn't have the same bite that the first one did, and I think it's because they just stepped on the gas and didn't really do anything too clever the way that they did with the first one. Next up, we've got an action comedy on the list that actually stars Adam Devine from Workaholics, Pierce Brosnan, and Ellen Barkin in The Outlaws.
Do I look cool?
Yeah, you look like James Bond.
Which one?
5.
Well, that was a good one.
Now, in this movie, Adam Devine actually plays a bank manager who's getting married to the chick from Vampire Diaries, and her parents, Brosnan and Barkin, are a couple of notorious bank robbers. This is a Happy Madison production, a Adam Sandler production. While he's not in the movie, it does have that Adam Sandler sensibility, but Adam Devine actually leads this thing off. If you've been a fan of his ever, then you definitely need to check this one out. But I'll say I really enjoyed what Pierce Brosnan did with this movie as well. Keep in mind, this is a made-for-TV action comedy. It's not worth multiple viewings, but if you like anyone involved, it's a fun 90-minute watch. Every month or so, Netflix releases a kids movie, typically an animated movie, and they're often not very good, but one that did stand out to me this year was The Monkey King, mainly just because I thought the animation style was beautiful, the storytelling was pretty exceptional for a Netflix kids movie. So if you somehow missed this one and you've got kids or nieces or nephews, put it on your list. But my next pick is a decent Halloween watch for the art film crowd, if you're lucky enough to catch this video before Halloween passes. It's titled El Conde, or The Count. Now, this is a vampire movie, but it's not really gonna appeal to vampire fans. This is much more of a history buffs movie. And when you watch the initial setup, the first 15 minutes of the movie or so, you will understand why. You actually follow the story of a vampire who's hundreds of years old and eventually decides to settle down in Chile and become the most powerful person in the country. He wants to essentially become a king. They get all of that out of the way fairly quickly, and then it becomes about this vampire at the end of his life, where he's kind of deciding he no longer wants to live, he's done it all. This is fairly slow paced, but again, history buffs, I think you're gonna like a lot of elements in this, especially as you get later on in the story. Next up, I've got the first of 3 of the best South Korean Netflix originals released this year. This one's titled Unlocked, and it's actually pretty terrifying. It's about a young girl who loses her phone, or at least someone is able to hack into it, and the way that that is portrayed is absolutely terrifying. It feels so real. But an absolute psycho has broken into her phone, and he doesn't just try to get her, he tortures her in these really unusual ways through the phone, and they all feel like something that could happen. This is a really unnerving movie that could only take place today, within the last several years. This is not something that could have happened to you 10 years ago, and it's really effective in that respect. I mean, it feels like it's of the time, and it's just a solid thriller. Again, here, there's nothing mind-blowing other than the fact of what's possible with phones, how much you could torture somebody if you were able to access their phone in this way. But it's important to say, especially if you're a new viewer on the channel, welcome, but all of the foreign language movies on this list feature very, and I mean very good English dubs. They're also dubbed in a handful of other languages, and that's one thing that Netflix excels at. Nobody else is doing that the way Netflix does. The voice acting in the dubs is fantastic, which you're not used to hearing with dubbed movies. Point being, do not be afraid of the foreign language movies on this list. Like I said, the English dubs that Netflix is doing are some of the best I've ever heard by far. Some of you will get a kick out of this one, because the next pick is not a good movie, but I still enjoyed it and really, truly appreciated the fact that it was made. I'm talking about Bert Kreischer's The Machine.
What is wrong with this shirt?
Now, this is an all-out action comedy starring him. If you don't know, his most famous stand-up comedy bit is about him getting involved with the Russian mafia, and whether or not that story is true, the stand-up routine is thoroughly entertaining, more so than the movie ended up being. And a big thing that held this movie back, I'm sorry, was Mark Hamill. My God, I don't know, I'm a fan of his, not just from Star Wars. He did the most amazing Joker voice for, I think, decades. I like him. He's terrible in this movie, and he really actually drags it down. I understand, like, you feel lucky enough to be doing a lower budget action comedy movie. Mark Hamill agrees to be in it. You gotta put him in it. But my goodness, he just didn't even, it doesn't even seem like he tried. If you're gonna look past that and you're a fan of Bert Kreischer and you heard bad things about the movie, I can't tell you. It was surprisingly funny, and the production value on it is pretty high. It's got a good glossy look to it, almost a John Wick look at times. And his co-star, Iva Babik, who I've not seen in anything before, she killed it. She brought the heat, and I think kind of made up for Mark Hamill in this flick. Before moving on with the rest of the list, if you like this shirt, I've got a bunch of designs just like it over at darrenvandam.com/shop. I've got shirts, hoodies, mugs. There's gonna be more stuff coming out. Some of these designs are limited edition and will not be around for long, so if you see something you like, definitely check it out. But my wife and I designed all of these together. They're all printed on extremely soft, comfortable, 100% cotton shirts. I did most of the concepts and the artwork. She did most of the actual finalized shirt designs. We had a lot of fun doing it and spent way too much time creating all these designs. So please go check them out. If you see something you like, it's a fantastic way to support the show. But speaking of things you might like, let's talk about the rest of the movies on this list. Okay, so my next pick is not a movie, but it is from director Wes Anderson, and it does run about 45 minutes, which is half the length of a movie. It's a recently released short film titled The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. It's got an all-star cast, feels very Wes Anderson, and feels much more like a stage play than a lot of his other work, even though most of his work feels kind of like a stage play. This and a handful of other shorts by Wes Anderson were just recently released, and they're all based on short stories from Roald Dahl. I also really enjoyed Poison, which is only about 17 minutes. I thought that was fantastic as well, but there are others. The Henry Sugar story, though, is truly wonderful. I watched it with my kids. They got a kick out of it, and it's more artsy and interesting than a lot of PG-rated stuff released, so I feel like I got a little culture into my kids with this one as well. But there's another famous stand-up comedian that's got a movie on Netflix that I'm ranking higher than The Machine. Bill Burr just recently released a movie titled Old Dads that he starred in, wrote, and directed, and I gotta say, he did a bang-up job on this thing.
Is there a reason we always have two white men dominating the discussion in this room?
That's not a white guy.
I'm confused.
Now, he himself is an old dad. I think he's about age 50 and has young kids, and that's what this movie is about. And while it is kind of a standard comedy at times, it's pretty damn funny. It picks apart the current culture in America pretty well, I think, especially for somebody like me that's pushing 40. But it also deals with some fairly heavy themes I was kind of surprised by. I mean, the runtime's almost 2 hours, and there's quite a bit of story here. If you're a fan of Bill Burr's comedy, you have to see this movie. There's also a bunch of other stand-ups that have little cameo roles in here as well. So again, this was a movie I fully anticipated to find funny, and I definitely did, but I was really surprised at how dramatic a lot of the scenes were as well. Next up, we got another bloody one from South Korea. It's titled Kill BOKSOON, and this one easily could have turned into a series. The world building with Kill BOKSOON is fantastic. You follow a female assassin, part of this bigger organization. There's nothing really new there, but the portrayal of it is pretty fantastic here. There's a little bit of John Wick inspiration here as well, but the organization features a school where they're training other assassins, and she's also just a mother. She's buying groceries and things, so it's got a unique touch to it. I like action films like this where half of it feels familiar. It's obviously derivative from other action movies, but then the other half is just unique and fresh, and that's exactly what you get with Kill BOKSOON. If you've been into South Korean movies, definitely check this one out. But if you've yet to discover some of the killer Korean flicks on Netflix, then this might be a good place to start, but trust me, I've got one closer to the #1 spot that might be even better for you. Now, as I'm recording this, my plan is to release this video on Saturday, October 21st, which I probably will do, but on the 22nd, Jennifer Lawrence's latest comedy flick is coming to Netflix, No Hard Feelings, and it is a doozy.
Hi. Mind if I touch your wiener?
What?
Your dog.
So I've always had a bit of a crush on her, and if you've ever had, you don't even need to know what this movie's about. Just watch it. Trust me, you can thank me later in the comments, but if you've not had a crush on her or have no particular affinity for her, she's really fantastic in this movie. Her comedy acting is top-notch, and not just in this movie. I feel like Jennifer Lawrence is best when she's being funny, but in this movie she plays a young woman who's down on her luck and decides to take an offer from a wealthy family to, for lack of a better word that I'm allowed to say on YouTube, sex up their 19-year-old son in order to get him to come out of his shell. And just looking at her in this movie, you would think that would be an easy task, and it is not. This kid is a real handful, and she has a real hard time getting him to come out of his shell, and it's all hilarious. In fact, one of the reasons this stood out to me, above just being kind of another standard comedy, is she is such a wild woman from the get-go in this story, so I really loved kind of how crazy and over-the-top her character was. Again, this releases on Netflix on Sunday in the US, not on Saturday when I plan on releasing this video. The only documentary on this list makes Free Solo look like a cakewalk, and it was just recently added to Netflix, Race to the Summit. The star of Free Solo, Alex Honnold, is also featured in this documentary because he spent a lot of time with these speed climbers. And if you don't know, speed climbing is just somehow way more intense than free solo climbing. Now, there's a lot of guys climbing with gear in this, and it's really about efficiency and speed, but then you get caught up with these two characters who start climbing mountains with no gear or limited gear, and they're trying to race and do it as quickly as they can. It's so intense. I don't know how mountain climbing could get even wilder than this. If you enjoyed Free Solo or any of the recent rock climbing movies to have been released, there's a handful of them, this one's really unnerving but so exciting to watch as well. Netflix somehow keeps pumping out exceptional World War II movies. They release at least one a year, if not two or three, and my favorite from 2023 is titled NARVIK, Hitler's First Defeat. This takes place early on in World War II in Norway, in a small mining town where most of the iron ore the Nazis were using came from. And the residents decide to try to sabotage this supply line, completely cutting off the Nazis, and a pretty intense battle ensues. Not only is there some great action, mostly revolving around this railway that they're trying to sabotage, but there's other story elements weaved within it, and there just seems to be like endless stories out of World War II. There's always something new I'm discovering, and NARVIK was, again, one of the more exceptional ones I've seen in recent memory. Next up, we've got a pick from Thailand that will appeal to people who are addicted to cooking shows. This one's titled Hunger, and it's kind of like that movie The Menu with Ralph Fiennes, except it's not a horror movie with a weird twist. Instead, you follow a young woman who's recruited to work in a high-pressure kitchen run by this ruthless chef. And early on, to me, it felt like there was something almost supernatural happening with this one. The way that wealthy people reacted to his food is so bizarre, and that's kind of where that ends. This ends up being much more of a story about, pursuing your dreams, the pitfalls that can come with that, and it's a really intense drama, even with the dubbed version on. I'm telling you, Netflix is killing it with that. This one you could watch in the original Thai, watch it dubbed. It is just a high drama, kitchen oriented movie that, again, will just appeal to anyone who's been a fan of shows like The Bear, that movie The Menu, Gordon Ramsay. You like any of that, Hunger is just a killer drama, again, from Thailand. A few months back, I did a list of sci-fi movies on Netflix, and right when I released that, Netflix released my next pick. They cloned Tyrone, which easily would have ranked high on that list had I seen it before releasing that video. But this is one I was excited about for a while. They've been teasing things out about it. You've got Jamie Foxx and John Boyega in this satire thing that had just a fantastic flavor to it. It's a little silly, but it doesn't really lean on that too much. It ends up being kind of a cool, weird, twisted sci-fi horror flick that's not crazy scary. It's not got over-the-top sci-fi stuff. It's just got this beautiful, subtle flavor that I absolutely loved, in the sense that it just nailed being exactly what it was supposed to do, much more so than most Netflix originals. This is one that I think could have done fairly well in theaters, and unfortunately, Netflix originals just get forgotten about almost immediately, but They Cloned Tyrone is the type of movie that could have achieved some sort of cult status. I don't know that Netflix originals are really ever going to do that as well as they otherwise could have.
Let's get it, man.
And my top two are two of the newest movies released on this particular list, and while it could be because they're just fresher in my mind, I did love both of these movies, my number 2 pick being Reptile.
So what happened?
Now, I will say, for a murder mystery movie, there were some glaring plot holes in Reptile, but I thought everything else was so good, I was able to overlook them. Mainly, Benicio del Toro's performance. I'm a big fan of his. I liked the Sicario movies, but he was so quiet and still in those. It's been a while since I've really seen him on screen a lot, doing a lot of acting, and he is just killer in this flick. He plays a homicide detective investigating a brutal murder of a young woman. Justin Timberlake is pretty exceptional in this. He typically is. He doesn't do a lot of movies, and whenever he does, he's pretty good. He's pretty good here too. There's an amazing supporting cast in this and some really subtle touches, especially if you watch true crime stuff or interrogation videos or anything like that. Again, there's a lot of subtle details in this, which actually made some of the plot holes really disappointing because everything else felt so tight. But I'm telling you, if you like true crime, murder mystery stuff, there's not been anything fiction-wise this good on Netflix in a long time. My number 1 pick is a sleeper that just hit Netflix a few weeks ago. It too has a lot of John Wick influence, and it is one of the coolest flicks I've seen from South Korea in a long time, and I love me some South Korean action flicks. I'm talking about Ballerina. Now, even though this is an action movie with some wild, over-the-top, bloody, and I mean bloody, action sequences, it's not an all-out action movie. There's only a few action sequences, one at the beginning, one at the end, 1 or 2 in the middle. Other than that, it's a fairly surprisingly dialogue-heavy movie. Furthermore, I thought it did something amazing for a female-led action movie. So often, those are done in an entertaining way, but not necessarily a realistic way. And even though Ballerina is very colorful and stylish, there's something about her that I think made this much more grounded and realistic. This has a killer score for a Netflix original. I loved all of the music in this one. Now, this one does deal with some pretty dark themes, but never shows you anything too overtly upsetting. I watched so many movies in this genre. It's one of my favorites. I love so many elements about it, but they somehow managed to surprise me with a lot of decisions that they made going into this one. And again, for a movie that is really not packed with that much action, I found it thoroughly entertaining, and it's one of my favorite Netflix originals I've seen all year, which is why it gets the number 1 spot. Let me know which ones you've enjoyed in the comments below. Maybe I missed some that I need to go check out to put on future videos. Again, don't forget to check out the DarrenVanDam.com link in the description, or just go there yourself. It's easy enough to type in, but I'll keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Netflix episode, and you will see me on the next one.